This is a review of the Command Modern Air Naval Operations game by Herman Humm. The game was hide and seek, played over 1 million square miles of ocean. The losers died. Tom Clancy, Red Storm Rising, 1986. Here's the executive summary, the Dirty Dozen. The good. 1. Many game functions and commands are compatible with Harpoon 3. Harpoon 3 veterans will easily grasp game concepts. 2. The physics package will ensure that all units observe the laws of physics. 3. Highly detailed sensor and weapons resolution. 4. A scenario editor allows for scenario writing. 5. Third-party modifications to images, sounds, and icons are easy to add. 6. Color-coded messages for ease of reference. The bad. Number 7. No multiplayer capability. Number 8. No database editing capability. And the downright ugly. Number 9. Crude formation editor capability. Number 10. Air traffic control system congestion and failure. 11. User interface is severely overloaded, cluttered, and un-user-friendly. 12. Direct player control is difficult to exercise. This ends the executive summary. Former Harpoon 3 players may already feel comfortable to jump right into the game. Command Modern Air Naval Operations, hereafter referred to as MNO, is published by Matrix Games and is the first game developed by Warfare Sims Limited. Players are able to take charge of air and naval assets from the post-World War II era on up to the near future at both the tactical and operational scale. The game is limited to solitaire play and comes complete with historical and hypothetical scenarios as well as an integrated scenario editor. MNO version 1.0 is a continuous time tactical wargame that can be paused or run at time compression rates between 1 and 20 minutes for every second of real time. Each unit or platform in military parlance represents an individual satellite, aircraft, ship, submarine, or land facility. Units can be grouped together to form bases, squadrons, task forces, and flights. The user interface and subordinate menu windows and displays are based upon Windows format and can be resized or minimized, thereby allowing a modicum of flexibility. Only one map window is available. To depict the entire battle area with which players can zoom in for precise detail, or zoom out for a truly global perspective. The player is expected to detect, analyze, and classify new contacts on the water, above it, or below the surface. Sensors run the gamut from conventional binoculars, radar, and sonar to electronic support measures known as ESM, which detect active radar signals. If the contacts are deemed hostile, he can select a course of action. This could mean an attack with a wide variety of weaponry ranging from machine guns to torpedoes, missiles, and airborne lasers. Them electronically, or in accordance with the scenario objectives, he could avoid combat altogether with a detour around the threat. Factors simulated by the game engine include, but are not limited to, weapons and sensor performance, aerial refueling, weather and visibility conditions, electronic warfare, communications networks, nuclear weapons, and the all-important fog of war, along with many others. Many commands available to the modern task force commander are also available within the game. The player makes the most vital decisions. Is the new radar contact a fisherman innocently setting his nets, or an enemy missile boat approaching with malice aforethought? Scenarios range from small intimate affairs, duels, to mid-sized naval clashes between task groups that cover a few square miles of the North Sea or Gulf of Mexico. Theoretically, scenarios can even cover both sides of the Atlantic. Unfortunately, the limitations of computer processor capabilities usually restrict battles to the tactical and operational side. Monster-sized scenarios with hundreds of platforms are available for those who wish to push their computational limits. NO gameplay revolves around the solitary map window, where information is reported and orders issued. Units are selected and given orders from either the various pull-down menus or from a limited range of hotkeys. Fans of the Harpoon 3 series of games will be happy to know that many MNO hotkeys, functions, and features are similar, if not identical, to the Harpoon 3 games. In short, Harpoon 3 players can navigate MNO with ease. Units can be given precise orders, or such as courses, and status of sensors. Or they can be assigned to more generalized missions that are executed under AI control. This gives the player the choice of micromanagement or leadership by objectives. Under the micromanagement style of play, units will follow their orders as precisely delineated with few exceptions. The player can set the doctrine and rules of engagement ROE for units individually or all units under control. Doctrine and ROE will help determine the unit's behavior, such as when to refuel, return to base, or evade missiles, as well as emissions control (EMCON) status, which governs whether or not the unit uses active sensors such as radar, jamming, and sonar. There is a significant behavior that is almost beyond player control, practical player control. Automated air defense. When a unit detects a threat from hostile aerial units or missiles, the unit will undertake all necessary measures consistent with the protection and preservation of its integrity. This means defensive missiles and their associated fire control radar systems will automatically activate. These actions often result in the exposure of previously hidden units through their electronic emanations. Also, the automated responses can squander precious weapons on targets deemed unworthy or unnecessary by the player. As a side note, Harpoon 3 also had a mandatory automated response at one time. However, the developers recognized its severe and detrimental shortcomings and wisely returned overall control to the player in subsequent versions. MNO players can disable the default automated air defense behavior. Harpoon 3 players might recognize this act as enabling the weapon's tight status globally. However, the MNO cure may be almost as bad as the illness itself, and only partially deactivates this automated response. To do so, the player must select each and every group individually. No drag select allowed. You select it, right-click on it, select Attack Options, and select Hold Fire. No AI attacks. With hundreds of units in some scenarios, this can mean hundreds or thousands of clicks just to turn off this desirable behavior. To return units to the default free status in MNO, simply repeat the same few hundred clicks. In comparison, Naval War Arctic Circle NWAC and Harpoon 3 activates and deactivates weapons tight status either with 2 mouse clicks or a single keystroke. Players should note the hold fire setting only prohibits physical weapons release. Units will still freely activate radar, sonar, and ECM jamming systems, thereby revealing their presence to the AI, although it is still a mystery as to how active sonar supposedly helps a unit defend against aerial attack. In this situation, the radar is the only active sensor for this group. A missile is detected. The sensors, sonar, and GPS have also activated. As said before, it's still unclear as to how sonar helps repel an airborne attack. And now we'll return to weapons free. The mission editor. The mission editor window. Players unwilling to micromanage their assets can cede control to the AI via the mission editor. This feature allows the player to create various missions and assign his units to them for the AI to conduct. These missions can include tasks such as combat patrols, CAP, airborne early warning, AEW, strike, or anti-submarine warfare. Once assigned, the AI will attempt to perform the missions according to its own pre-programmed behavior, as well as the doctrine settings. Units assigned to missions will be under AI control. The AI will determine all aspects such as throttle settings, altitude, sensor status, approach path, and every other factor. It is significant to note that the MNO mission editor lacks any timing feature necessary to actually coordinate missions. The missions simply execute as soon as possible. A player could get the strong impression of a game meant primarily for play according to AI-controlled missions with only minimal interference from the human. Unfortunately, the multiple difficulties encountered by players attempting to exercise control only serve to reinforce this perception. Whether a player elects to play the game via micromanagement practices or delegate authority to the AI-controlled missions, the overall objective is to maneuver his units into range of the enemy, fire upon them, destroy the targets, fulfill the victory conditions as set forth by the scenario designer. Victory conditions are often defined as the destruction of some enemy units, the protection of some friendly units, and or the arrival of units at a destination. The user interface. The user interface, or UI, is touted as one of the main new features for MNO. A good number of points are worth noting, such as 1. Windows basis. 2. Specific message options. 3. Color-coded messages. 4. H3 compatible hotkeys and functions. 5. Hyperlinked contact window. 6. Engagement restrictions explained. 7. Laws of physics observed. 1. The Windows basis. Windows can be resized and moved for convenience. Two, specific message options. Message options. The player can specify which messages he wishes to see and which to ignore. The ability to close the window with a simple touch of the escape key is noteworthy, only because this is one of the few MNO windows with this fundamental capability. 3. Color-coded message. It says message overlay scrolls. Messages are received in white, red, yellow, or green, depending upon the level of severity. Administrative tasks generally come in green. New contact notifications come in yellow, while hostile enemy action comes in red. The ability to see these messages as they scroll over the map make it easy for the player to see important messages without losing focus on the action. The colors help identify which messages require immediate attention. Message pop-up. In addition, the pop-up message window option allows the player to reposition the map directly to the location of the subject in the report. Harpoon Classic players will recognize this ability. Unfortunately, no color changes are allowed within the game, so any player afflicted with either color blindness or other visual impairment is out of luck. 4. Harpoon 3 compatible hotkeys and functions. Many hotkeys are similar or identical to other games such as Harpoon 3, thereby reducing the learning curve substantially for veteran players. Many of these hotkeys, F1 for attack, F2 for throttle, plot course, edit formation, magazines, air ops, sensors, are the same as for Harpoon 3. The hyperlinked contact window. The contact report window is hyperlinked to other windows. The contact report shows detected emissions from an N10 Juke radar system. Beneath it are all the possible matches to aircraft that carry this system listed. The player can click on any of the fulcrum entries and immediately be transferred to the database function to examine the platform details. Unfortunately, the contact window appears to be one of the few MNO windows to support this highly desirable feature. Contact engagement restrictions explained. When weapons are unable to fire, the player is shown the rationale behind the restriction. Even obvious database errors such as this are revealed. Out of range. Cross-section, cross-range ambiguity, out of range. Not loaded are some of the explanations given. Unfortunately, some messages are virtually useless since no further information is available. For example, when a player is notified that target is within 5 nautical miles and outside the weapon mount's engagement arc, there is simply no way to determine the firing engagement arc of any weapon. Laws of physics observed. This is probably the very best MNO game feature. The laws of physics are observed by all units and platforms. Units cannot instantaneously change altitude, direction, or speed. There are no more over-the-shoulder missile engagements against targets in pursuit of the launching unit. This feature generally works in most cases, even if there are still instances where torpedoes easily dive hundreds of meters to kill submarines and Tomcat jet fighters are able to hover motionless like helicopters while never expending a drop of fuel. The user interface, or UI, at its barest and most primitive level, generally works. Although there are many instances where it is counterintuitive, rough, awkward, unpolished, and far less than user-friendly, it does get the basic job done. Unfortunately, it is akin to using a rock as a hammer, since it leaves the player's hand very sore. Several significant failings are worth noting, such as 1. Sensory map overload. 2. Lack of hotkeys. 3. Information failures. 4. Basic Windows features lacking. 5. Imprecise speed and altitude settings. 6. Event engine initiation. 1. The map sensory overload. The use of a single map with boundless worldwide capabilities neatly avoids the problem other games encountered when units could fly off the map and cause a crash. However, use of a single map brings its own set of limitations and consequences. A few of the most glaring UI problems are: A. The inability to turn off graphic features. B. The difficulty in navigating large areas. C. Global weather. D. Lack of dedicated formation editor window. A. The inability to turn off graphic features. Players are inundated with information from the single map display. Not all data may be deemed necessary or helpful to the player. But there are a few ways to limit this flood. This image shows the number of superimposed images and their warnings over North Vietnam. So much data and so many warnings are given that they blur together and prevent usefulness. At present, there is no way to turn off the superfluous data, especially the mouse-over black box. A menu window similar to the message options is desperately needed to stem this tide. B. Difficulty in navigating larger areas. We've zoomed in to check out the situation at the target. Now we wish to examine our own bases. How can we find them? The only real option is zoom in, then zoom out, zoom in again on another target, slowly, zoom out, move to our base, zoom in, check information, zoom out, and back to our previous area of focus. It is difficult to navigate and control units over a large area. Having only a single map with which to work, players are constantly forced to zoom in and out to check relatively minor things, or just to clarify the map window. As stated previously, this is cumbersome and awkward, although functional. There simply is no way to zoom in or out quickly. Most wargames offer a jump map that facilitates movement between distant areas. As it stands, MNO is best used within a relatively small area. Currently, MNO allows the camera to zoom in via the scroll wheel. This is highly functional and helpful. Another industry standard that is missing is the option to scroll in wherever the mouse is currently situated. Giving players the additional zoom at mouse option would be very useful. A popular mouse option used in games like Naval War Arctic Circle, Global Conflict Blue 2 GCB2, and Steam and Iron SAI is the use of the scroll wheel to reposition a map. This feature allows the players to depress the scroll wheel to hold a map down so that it can be shifted. Currently, MNO centers the map at the current mouse position if the right-click button is depressed. It works, but the NWAC capability would allow players small corrections, precision, and flexibility. C. Global weather. Weather is simulated and affects sensors. Unfortunately, the weather controls for MNO are set globally. This means that scenarios which span a large area covering both the tropics and polar regions will share the same weather settings. If a snowstorm is selected for the North Pole, then it will be snowing at the equator. We can see that it's no rain and it's 15 degrees at this point from the black bar mouse over window. When we hold the mouse over at the North Pole, we see that it is also no rain. The lack of dedicated formation editor. This is the single greatest MNO failures. The formation editor feature allows units within groups, forces, to arrange themselves relative to one another in order to act as a single cohesive unit, so that some units can act as screen for others. This is commonly known as station keeping. And generally works in this game. Naval games such as Harpoon and Naval War Arctic Circle have dedicated formation editor windows. However, MNO uses the single map window to try and accomplish this complicated task and fails miserably. strictly from a functional viewpoint, it works. But it does so crudely, increases clutter and confusion, and without flourishes and capabilities exhibited by other games nearly 20 years older. The image under Group Display shows a very tiny carrier battle group consisting of just 4 ships, with no aircraft patrols assigned. The picture is already somewhat cluttered. It takes very little imagination to foresee the mayhem and chaos involved after the assignment of combat air patrols, anti-submarine warfare patrols, and airborne early warning patrols. These patrols do not include any other missions that would normally be needed in a scenario. For those who need help, it could look like this. Although the MNO formation editor is theoretically functional, it is hideously inefficient and easily contributes to incredible confusion. Other games like Harpoon handle this function much more elegantly by allowing the player to hide the extraneous ship icons, aircraft, and reference points to avoid clutter. Two, lack of hotkeys. Although a few hotkeys are present and match game functions with Harpoon 3, far more would be helpful. Most displays such as damage control and contacts can only be activated via the mouse click on a button. Having a hotkey both activate and deactivate the same window or report acting as a toggle would be supremely useful. As stated previously, the current situation using buttons and mouse clicks is functional, but neither very polished nor user-friendly. A good case in point would be the Map Options pull-down menu. Just to turn off the current settings displayed would require 20 or more individual clicks back and repeatedly activating the map settings pull-down menu, since there are no hotkey functions whatsoever in the menu. A map settings menu set up like the message options window would be ideal to allow players to set all the map options in a single instance and not 20 or more individual actions. Information failures. Basic and vital information is often difficult to locate or missing entirely. Several instances of this occur, including A. Aircraft loadouts range, B. Aircraft loadouts reloads, C. Weapons performance, D. Weapon mounts. A. Aircraft loadouts range. The air operations window is severely deficient in information and not very intuitive. This is where players select amongst various loadouts to arm and launch their air assets. No range information is available whatsoever for any of the possible loadouts. Players have no idea which loadouts have sufficient range to reach the targets. The hyperlink capability found in the aforementioned contact report window is desperately needed here. Currently, players are forced to drop out of the weapons menu, move to the database viewer menu, find the relevant information, and return. An additional column showing the range for each loadout is urgently needed. As stated earlier, this window is functional, but neither efficient nor polished. B. Aircraft loadouts, reloads. The Air Ops window is not intuitive, as it does not readily show the player which loadouts are available. The only way to know if a loadout can be selected is to actually click on each and every loadout entry to see if any weapons pack available message appears at the bottom of the loadout screen. When aircraft have 30 or more possible loadouts, and only number 3, 8, 23, 27, and 29 are available to the player, it is a nightmare trying to remember which loadouts are possible and then decide which ones to select. The process is almost as confusing as trying to order at a Chinese restaurant. Select 2 items from column 1, 1 item from column 3, and if you ordered fried rice, you get egg roll. An additional column showing loadout packs available for each loadout is sorely needed. Hyperlink capability could also exponentially increase the efficiency of this window. As stated previously, the window is functional, but not very efficient, user-friendly, or polished. C. Weapons performance. Weapons data can be seen on a number of reports. The details such as range, damage potential, and launch parameters are nicely included. However, any sign of actual performance is missing. Such information is necessary for players to make informed decisions about their units. How much better is a Maverick missile when compared to a laser-guided bomb? There really is no basis for comparison. Over accuracy. D. Weapons mounts. This button calls up the weapons currently loaded on a platform. Players can also reload different weaponry at this point. The window is basically functional, but is non-intuitive because it is missing important data. For example, not every player can know exactly what every weapon does. What is the difference between a starfish and a Type 53-65A torpedo? A hyperlink would be immensely helpful for veterans and novitiates alike. Also, there is no indication as to the availability of weapons. If a player wishes to reload the Type 53-65A with a starfish, are there any starfish even aboard? The window lacks this vital datum. The player can activate the magazine report window, check on availability of starfish, and then return to this window, but that simply demands additional steps to locate basic information. As previously stated, this window is functional, but not very polished. Four, basic Windows features lacking. MNO uses a Windows format in design. However, it often fails to make use of many common Windows features. Window size and position can be changed, but these changes are rarely persistent. A player could take the effort to resize, move it, find his information, then leave it again, only to come back and need to make the changes again. Also, the only way to close nearly every window is via the close box in the upper right-hand corner. Many other Windows-based applications allow the user to close windows with A, the escape key, B, OK or cancel buttons, C, application of the same hotkey, or D, return or enter keys. Ideally, all four capabilities would make a UI truly user-friendly. As previously stated, the current Windows arrangement is fully functional. However, it may not be very user-friendly or very polished, since a player is constantly hunting for the close button to leave Windows. And the Windows, if there's moving back and forth just to hit that one little button. 5. Imprecise speed and altitude settings. It is difficult for a player to order a specific speed or altitude for units under his direct control, since the window operates with sliders and a few basic throttle settings. Units with slower speeds are easier to direct, but it is nearly impossible to assign a specific value for speed or altitude to aircraft in order to coordinate their movements at a uniform speed. As stated earlier, this window is perfectly functional, but not very user-friendly or polished. Six, event engine initiation. MNO includes an event engine. This function is used to trigger actions under certain conditions. For example, the game could send a message to the player giving additional orders midway through a game. The event engine is also used to randomize the starting location of units through teleportation to different locations. While the randomization feature is essential to any game's replay value, the way MNO conducts this exercise is somewhat weird. Most games offer randomization as a basic feature. When the player loads the game, random locations are selected and the units are placed on the map in their starting locations. The player can then proceed to enjoy the game. In MNO, the player loads the scenario, issues his orders, and then starts the scenario, only to find that his units miraculously move a few hundred miles and that he needs to reissue his orders and plans. While this function works as designed, it does appear bizarre to normal players, especially since MNO is supposedly created from scratch and thus could easily use a more normal and traditional pre-start randomization process. The event engine is also used to simulate things like airborne paratroop deployment. When the transport aircraft arrives at a predetermined location, the event engine triggers and a land unit, or paratroop formation, magically teleports to that location to simulate the deployment of the unit by parachute. Although this seemingly works at a cosmetic level, it raises fundamental questions like, why is such an awkward implementation required in a game that is supposedly starting from a fresh code base? Why not simply allow the aircraft to deploy the airborne unit wherever it likes, the way it happens in real life? How does the unit re-embark, not teleport, back onto the aircraft? Why the workaround nature of the event engine? The function is especially odd since MNO successfully introduced a new feature allowing for the deployment and subsequent recovery of landing craft from amphibious ships. The event engine seems to have been implemented as an afterthought. Old games struggling within the restrictive bounds of legacy source code such as Harpoon, Fleet Command, or Combat Mission might try to shoehorn or cram a new additional feature in such a ham-fisted ad hoc manner. Games that do this often end up looking like Frankenstein's monster. As stated previously, the event engine is perfectly functional for randomization, but not very polished. Taken individually, the UI shortcomings might be viewed as quirky, inconvenient, or just annoying. However, when seen in the aggregate whilst playing, the rough and unpolished UI can make a player feel as though he is fighting the UI instead of the AI. Air Traffic Control System. MNO introduces a new level of complexity to aircraft operations, which may be the single most gratuitously convoluted function in this game. In most games like Harpoon Commander's Edition, Naval War Arctic Circle, or Harpoon 3, air operations are slightly abstract, with planes taking off every minute or so. Players have a general idea how long it takes because it is uniform and easy to integrate into mission planning. In MNO, air operations are an intricate affair, with planes leaving their hangars, using elevators, rolling down taxiways, and taking off according to runway limitations, forming groups, performing their assigned missions before entering the landing traffic pattern to return to base and land. Launch and recovery operations are fully automated, and a player could not interrupt the AI control process even if he wants, and he definitely will. Theoretically, it sounds wonderful and complicated and adds a level of complexity not often found in war games. Unfortunately, James Doohan, engineer Montgomery Scott from Star Trek, said it best in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. The more they overthink the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. This is exactly what happens. Planes can find themselves unable to launch from clogged runways. Different aircraft can have various launch times such as 1 minute 30 seconds, 2 minute 30 seconds, 3 minutes 45 seconds, thus making it impossible to coordinate activities because there is no way to know what the times are without actually launching. Aircraft can fail to land and then crash from fuel starvation because of problems and congestion in the traffic control pattern. Air traffic control students might enjoy this element in the game, but most players will likely only find it confusing while adding no entertainment value whatsoever beyond snarled airports and crashed airplanes, not to mention scenarios. Although some may perceive this feature as a realism factor, that is only true if they think plowing $60 million aircraft into the ground from fuel deprivation is realistic because the planes could not get through the landing pattern. Scenario editor and modifications. The scenario editor in MNO has been the subject for a great deal of boasting. Not only will it allow users to create their own scenarios, it supposedly allows for limited database editing capability. To be perfectly clear, no database editing capability whatsoever exists within the MNO scenario editor. Users who actually need database editing capability should not delude themselves, as MNO simply does not offer this possibility. The MNO database is comparable to a deck of cards. Players can shuffle and mix items already found within the database, but users can neither create nor anything new, nor modify the values or behavior of any pre-existing system. This means that Russian radar can be placed upon NATO planes or American missiles on Chinese ships, but no new systems can be created that do not already exist within the database, nor can users change the performance of any pre-existing system. This feature equates to nothing more than moving around the pre-existing database furniture. Most users can recognize this function is not database editing, as properly exemplified by the Total War series, Paradox Games, and Harpoon. Each user must decide for themselves whether or not the game's database recombination or rearrangement function actually meets their needs and expectations. We can add a weapon to the USS Cook. We'll add it onto the pre-existing mount for simplicity. We'll add the weapons record. We are now able to fire 100mm rounds from this mount. The scenario editor notwithstanding, many other components of the game are readily modifiable. Third-party users have already collected images for platforms, since only a single solitary image is included with the official game. Even sound modifications for explosions and such appear feasible. This is the only image included with the official release of the game. The map and icons are pleasant, but certainly not first-person shooter quality. It is okay, since that level of detail is unnecessary. The map offers excellent graphic representation and allows for a high level of precision and detail. The one shortcoming is the fact that only Naval Tactical Data System symbols, NTDS, are officially available in the map displays. While this is ultra realistic, it would have been nice to see some more easily recognizable symbols, or at least have that option available. Learning the NTDS system is not an impossible task, but not everyone wants to memorize the entire gamut of symbols either. It's a game after all, and not a vocation. Thankfully, third-party icons are available and have been used during this review. The sounds are limited to a few explosions, gunfire, and what were supposedly missile and aircraft launching. They appear to have congealed horribly and only created confusion, since it was not possible to distinguish between them. In the end, they were just turned off for the duration of this review. Documentation and technical. The manual is quite poorly done, is heavily laced with jargon, lists non-existent references, and is peppered with simple spelling errors. A reader could be confused as to whether the author is describing the game or the scenario editor. It almost assumes that the player already knows how to play other games like Harpoon. Newcomers to the genre may not find it very helpful. The tutorial lessons are detailed and provide adequate instructions for newcomers. The pros of the game: detailed sensor modeling, fog of war, weapons engagements, the physics package, a high level of weapons and platform detail, excellent control over messages, color-coded message overlay. The cons are inadequate hotkey usage, way too much clickology. Auto aerial defense is mandatory, virtually. Lack of a database editor. Lack of a formation editor or multiple map windows. No multiplayer capability. The single map display is overloaded, cluttered, and user-unfriendly. The bottom line: this game is theoretically functional, but it could easily have used an additional 6 months for optimization and polish. As it currently stands, MNO is a hodgepodge of ideas haphazardly thrown together. It is good that MNO replicates many functions from Naval War Arctic Circle and Harpoon 3. It's too bad that many bad ones are also duplicated while helpful ones were forgotten. Features such as the formation editor and event engine are prime examples of good ideas for functions that were poorly implemented or badly integrated. The awkwardness of the UI makes the game a chore to play instead of a pleasure. A thorough re-examination of the overall design phase might be prudent, especially considering how so many features, generally considered standard within the naval wargame genre, are conspicuously missing. This is version 1.0, and hopefully improvements will come in the form of game patches instead of paid patches, also known as downloaded content or DLC. Should this game be meaningfully patched in an expeditious manner, an update of this review is certainly possible.